Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another of TTA's summer sessions. Today, we're joined by Charlotte Watson, who's going to be doing a talk on getting started in the 11 plus tuition world. So I'll hand over to Charlotte now, and there'll be time for questions throughout the talk and at the end.
Yeah, so thank you. As I say, nice to see some names and faces that I recognise, and always lovely to see new people. This is such a huge world that, you know, it's so wonderful to know that there's constantly new people coming on board, particularly to the TTA. So really, I don't want to say too much about myself. What I can say is if you do want to know more about me and my background, there's my website. You can also find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook and also Instagram. But this today is all about getting started in the 11 plus world. It's a world, I'll be really honest with you, when I first started teaching, I was led to believe that the 11 plus system didn't exist in this country anymore. You wouldn't believe it, but when I was doing teacher training, we were taught this really narrow view of the history of education. And it was only when I randomly moved to Wallington, if you know Wallington, that I realized the 11 plus still existed. Crazy, I know. And I'd been teaching for quite a long time before that. And then I went into tutoring. But can I just get a little idea of where you guys are all at? So in chat, if you could just let me know, I've got 3 words. So are you literally just getting started, right? Getting started. So you either haven't even started or you've been doing it for maybe less than 6 months, or are you dabbling in the 11 plus world? Maybe you've been doing it between 6 months and 2 years, or do you feel a little bit more established? So maybe 2+ years. So we've got somebody dabbling. So basically new, dabbling, or established. And I know you might not want to confess to feeling like you're established. You know, I'm still learning. I've been doing 11 plus for 7 years now, and I certainly still don't feel rusty. That's a good word. I like that. I like that. So we've got a few people just getting going, a couple of people established, some with no experience yet. That's all right. Well, that's what I'm here for today. I don't want to ever confess to being an expert. There are people who say they are. Some, I believe they really are. Others, I'm not so sure, but each to their own. I prefer to just say I specialize in the 11 plus. In fact, I specialize in exam preparation all the way through to GCSE, and it's something I fell into. And this is the interesting thing about getting started in the 11 plus world. Sometimes you fall into it. It's not necessarily something that was a strategy you had. I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go along. And this visual, kind of when it came up, it was one that I thought was quite appropriate, because I know for me, when I started out in it, it felt a bit like this massive whirl of colors and ideas, and it didn't seem to me that I had a very focused mind on what it all meant, and it all felt like, to be honest, a little bit of a blur. So I felt that that picture was quite apt. That may be you, that might not be, but let's get going with how we're going to proceed. So we're going to start, we've kind of talked about it already, but think about, and if you've got pen and paper, you might want to write this down. Where are you now? And you've more or less told me. So you've either said you're kind of starting, you're dabbling, you're established, you're rusty, you're this or that. Where are you now? And then what I want you to do is choose a time scale. Now, for each one of you, it's going to be different, because if you already feel you're established in some way, your time scale might be different from someone else. If you've just started, you might just want to cope with, say, 6 months. Thinking about a year or 5 years might be too far down the line for you. But where are you now, which we've already discussed? Where do you want to be? And you decide on that time scale. You might want to pick 2 time scales. You might want to say 6 months and then a year, or maybe a year and 5 years. You know, if you can even think that far. For some of you, that might be too far. I know for me, when I first started to think about the 11 plus, there's no way I would have even been able to strategize for 5 years at all. Now, the other thing I do want to say is please feel free to put questions as you wish, as they come up into chat, and we'll try and have little stopping points throughout the session to answer some of your questions. Now, you've got your timescale for where you want to be. This is really up to you. I am someone who loves to visualize. So for me, closing my eyes and seeing things in my mind's eye is something I feel very comfortable with. I have a colleague who absolutely can't visualize at all. She cannot do it. So what she does is she has to write things down or she has to draw. But what I want you to do is just take a moment. I'm going to ask you 3 questions. So it's up to you if you want to close your eyes. You know, if you want to close your eyes and maybe turn your screen off, that's up to you. You can keep your screen on. I don't mind. But we've said, where do we want to be in X amount of time? So however you want to do this, either closing your eyes or writing it down or doodling or just brainstorming, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. So the first question is, if you feel like you're moving on with your service for the 11 plus, first thing I want to know is, what will that look like to you? Where will you be? Will you be in a room with a child and visiting different children in their homes? Will you be on screen with individual children, pairs, groups? What will it look like in your timescale that you have given? What will have changed? What do you hope will happen next? What will that look like? And obviously you can write that down if you don't want to visualize it. What will that look like to you? Next question. What will it sound like? Will it be calm, bustling, exciting, gentle, serious, fun, mix? What will it sound like? What will the progression you've made sound like? What will you sound like? And finally, how will you feel? What will feel different? How will you feel in yourself, in your confidence level? If you put into place things that you would like to do, how will you feel in 6 months' time or in a year or 5 years, however it is that you want to set a time limit? How will you feel? How will it feel? Okay, anyone like to share in chat any buzzwords that they came up with? Anything that came to mind as you were doing that? Anything that you feel is where you want to be? What's your target of what things will look like or what they'll sound like or how you'll feel? Successful online groups, great start. Make sure you've written that down. Make sure you hold on to that. Exciting, fun and busy. Online groups, content, confident, comfortable. Hold on to that. Make sure that becomes something that you read every day. Anybody else? Thank you for that, Halima and Sarah. See if we've got time for one more. Thank you, Rowena. Local workshops with groups of children. Love it. So local, that's good. That's being really defined. Solid track record. Love that. So the reason I made you do this is it was very early on in my tutoring career in 2016. I was really struggling with one-to-one because I was just overwhelmed and I was exhausted and I was working far too many hours. Keep them coming in. I'll try and read some of these later. And I knew things had to change. I didn't feel very business-like. I come out of teaching and, you know, business was new to me and I didn't feel like I wanted to call myself that. And I had some sessions with Cam Pindora, if you know Cam. He's been a very established member of the TTA for a long time. And he made me look at things differently. And he made me do a vision board. The annoying thing is it's fallen. Everything seems to be falling today. It's fallen down the back of somewhere. And I really wanted to show it. But he made me visualize, put on paper. And I used words, I used pictures. And it was that I referred to and really thought about and helped push me forward to actually bring into the present what I wanted from the future. And it helped me really set things in action. So, you know, if you're not necessarily into this kind of way of working, you know, I've seen a lot of really good sentences and phrases in the chat. I will be calm, organized and encouraging, enthusiastic, full of life, focused. I suggest you make a note of these. And if you haven't done a vision board, find some pictures, find words, whatever will help you bring that future time into the now, that you can therefore, you know, bring it into happening and do the actions you need to do. So obviously what I'm going to try and do in this session is help you bring that future into the now with some actionable steps. So, and if I find my vision board, which has fallen down the back of my cabinet, I will get it out for you. But it really helped me. And I had things like flames and fire on it, because one of my favorite quotes is that one about, you know, education is lighting a fire, not filling a bucket. And I wanted to make sure that I was lighting the fire in all my students' lives in terms of education. So for me, not just getting them through the 11 plus was important, but that I was really giving them a passion for learning. And I believe that's what I do now. And that's kind of my USP. It's what I'm known for bringing that passion and enthusiasm and joy and fun into the learning. Now, as we've just said, thinking about your why do you want to do this is really important. And if you're established, I still think it's really important. You know, there are times where if I'm not careful, you know, I worry that I could get really stale at this. You know, I work with, so altogether I work with about 230 students a week, but 150 of those are 11 plus students. And I've been doing this for 7 years now. So I could get really dry if I didn't constantly check my why. Okay, so have a look at some of those. What resonates with you? Why do you want to do this? Okay, now in my case, it was because of the area I live in. I live in Wallington. So if you know Wallington, it's got Wilson's, it's got Sutton Grammar, it's got Wallington County Grammar, Wallington Girls, it's got Nonsuch, we've got Tiffin nearby, we've got all the other London grammars. I've also got a heck of a lot of independent schools. Okay, so I found when I was doing one-to-one, for instance, and this is not about swapping from one-to-one to groups. You might want to stick with one-to-one. So please forgive me if I constantly refer to my groups. But what I was finding anyway was, you know, I set myself up just as an English specialist, and you know, I got inquiries that way, but 90% of what people wanted was either GCSE, but the others was all 11 plus. I didn't have anyone wanting SATs preparation. Nobody in my area really cares about SATs. I had a few people who had children with neurodiversity or specific needs who wanted some one-to-one, but even they wanted 11 plus. And I ended up realizing this was the route because of necessity that I had to go down. And at that time in 2016, obviously a lot of it was face-to-face. I didn't do any online. So it was a case of quite a few of these. It was that everyone else's, it's popular in my area, it's what people are looking for. Wouldn't say at the time I particularly had an opinion about exam prep, but there were lots of opportunities and it made sense as an English specialist. This is what people want. Anyone got any to add? If you've got any other reasons why you want to get into this, think about it at the bottom. But again, knowing why you're doing this will, especially when it gets challenging or you feel sometimes you're going to have a bad day, you know, as well as thinking about how you want to be in the future and how you want to feel, knowing your why are you doing this? So for me, it's all about serving my community. It's serving the pupils that I am, I was trained as primary, putting my primary school practice into best use. I want to add as well that another reason why I wanted to do this was there are lots of providers, some very experienced, some set up more like businesses, where I was getting people who were inquiring for my services saying to me they've tried other places, weren't particularly giving very good feedback. There were a lot of people out there doing it in a very counterintuitive way, I'd say, to what we know is good pedagogical practice. And although I do have some ethical dilemmas about preparing for the 11 plus, which I won't go into now, I decided I wanted to do this because I wanted to show there was an alternative way to prepare for the 11 plus that didn't stress children out, that didn't give them mountains of homework. I do give homework, but didn't give them mountains of homework, that absolutely presented learning and education as something that's lifelong and not just something robotic that you do for an exam. So that's kind of my value that I also put on it. So Rowena's also said, bring out the maximum potential in students. Yep, it is controversial, but you know what? If we're not doing it, someone else will be. So for those of you in the TTA who are, whether you're ex-teachers or not, or you just have a passion for education, remember that you know how to deliver this in a way that doesn't have to be the way that it's always been done. The more of us that are doing this in a more productive and meaningful way, the better it's going to be for all children. Until the 11 plus is abolished, there will always be lots of people offering. And as I say, we want to be the best providers of it that we can be. And I know in my area, there are people who do not provide it in a way that I feel is good pedagogical practice and good for children's well-being. And it's more about the money than anything else. It's a business for them, nothing else. So think about your why. And obviously, as we go, you might want to write some of these ideas down. Once you've thought about your why, or if like me, sometimes you have to remind yourself of why you're doing things when you're having a bad day or you're exhausted. I've got 2 weeks of intensive summer school coming up next week. So my why is very important to me. Okay, think about what you know already, because I know I've seen it on a lot of forums where people say, oh, I don't know where to start. I don't feel, I'm an imposter. I've never done it. I'll be honest with you. So before I went into independent prep schools, I worked for about 10 years in the state sector. And of course, grammar schools, even if I worked in this local area, you're not allowed to prepare for it in state schools. You could talk about grammar school, and if you thought a child was able to take the test, but you couldn't prepare for it. But obviously, once I got into the independent sector, that was very different. And you were then, everything you did was targeting the types of exams that children were then doing. And I took a head of English job at an independent school, having never prepared children for the 11 plus. So clearly there was going to be a lot of imposter syndrome. And then when I took on work as a private tutor, having never prepared children for the grammar selective tests, again, I had to think, well, what makes me eligible? So never doubt your current experience. So I've given you some ideas there. Okay. Maybe you could tell me how many of those relate to you. Just put a number in chat, 1, 2, 3, 4, or perhaps if none of those do, but you've got other experience or knowledge, write that in. So excellent. We're playing bingo here. We're going to have a lot of 4s, I hope. But of course, don't worry if you don't hit them all. You don't have to have hit them all. I'm not a parent. I've never parented a child through the 11 plus. In fact, when I took on this job, preparing children for the 11 plus in a prep school, what could I say? Probably the top 2. I'd worked in a primary school, so I knew the curriculum. I'm a specialist subject teacher. Now, the one thing I will say is, for English and maths, for equality, what you've got to remember is the 11 plus, not so much obviously for private school because they have their own rules, but for the state grammar schools, it is all about equality. It is only meant to test children up to the year 6 curriculum. Now, I've heard different things for maths. I'm an English specialist, and I've heard people say it goes beyond. Okay, and we'll come to that in a minute. But don't ever think that if you are not capable, for instance, of getting children to exceeding expectations at year 6, you cannot prepare children for the 11 plus, because that is kind of the level we're looking at. Some people will tell you it's higher. Obviously, for some independent schools, it can be higher again. Sometimes it's lower. It really depends. The 11 plus in grammar schools is all about competition. It is so highly contested. It's not necessarily about working at an extremely high level that goes into key stage 3. It's more about, can you get the highest score possible so that you are in that clear cut, cut-off list to have passed it with a good score. So that's what we're looking at. Out of interest, can you just write in chat whether you're specifically looking at grammars, independent, or both, just so I can reference the right things? Okay, so a lot of you are both. Okay, that's great. But just remember, especially when you are marketing yourself, think about what you have got that makes you eligible. Don't ever let anyone question your eligibility to be an 11 plus teacher. Okay, and make sure you constantly refer to that. Okay, people, yes, do want to know that you have experience, whatever that looks like. At some point, you won't have had any experience in the 11 plus, but you will build it up, but you'll have had other experience. You'll have other specialisms, you'll have other skills. So really make sure that you remind yourself of what you're good at. Okay, now let's move on. Okay, so the groundwork, this is the hard thing. Okay, when I started, there weren't all these lovely Facebook groups. There weren't lots of 11 plus groups that I could get lots of information from. I had to do a lot of the groundwork myself. Now, that is still really important. Could you, in chat again, just let me know the kind of areas you're in? Now, for some of you, obviously, if you're working online, you could be targeting everywhere, but kind of give me, say, your top 2 places, either schools or areas that you are probably getting interest from. So we've got Surrey, Oxfordshire, Dulwich. Oh, Dulwich. I know Dulwich very well. Wolverhampton, Gloucestershire, Surrey, Kent. Okay. Okay. Excellent. So again, it's quite difficult to juggle, in a sense, too many areas if you want to manage both the subject matter but actual exam technique as well. So for me, I mean, obviously I started face-to-face, so I became known in my areas. So even though I do now tutor online as well, I do both, I have become known as one of the go-tos in the Sutton / Tiffin area. So it's very rare that I get students from somewhere completely random, although I do have some who are coming from the Warwickshire area, and I do get some people coming for GL schools, which I'll go into in a minute. But just be careful, because if you end up being a kind of a be-all to everyone, it can get a bit complicated when you're then discussing exam technique, because, for instance, the Sutton exam for English is like no other exam out there. Having said that, obviously, most of what I do is about building skills, and then I take a range of different question types and we go through them regardless of where we're aiming for. But I found it really helpful to know the schools I'm targeting, and obviously the type of exam that they are doing. The first thing you also want to do is decide what subjects are you going to teach. Are you going to do both English and maths? And if in your area there's MVR and VR as well, are you going to do all of those? Now, I'm quite unusual in that I have decided to only be an English specialist. There are lots of centres in my area. I can think of at least 5 who offer everything, and they're big, you know, big corporate organisations. But I felt there was a niche in my area for people needing an English specialist. I get a lot of people, unfortunately, come to me saying, oh, everything else is really great in this centre except the English, and we need extra English. Now, over time, what I'm trying to do, in my area, we only do English and maths. I am trying to link with good maths teachers to give people an option so they don't have to do everything somewhere else and then come for extra English to me. But you do need to check the schools, your area, your parents are wanting to target, but also the type of exam it is. Now, all the independents do put or explain very clearly and often put past papers on their websites. So it's very easy to get that. Now, Sutton, for instance, is very different. They only give you example questions and very little information. So what I've had to do is glean a lot of information over the years from my students themselves. Once they've done the exam, I've had to say, you know, what was in it? How many questions? How long? But yeah, definitely check the schools and what they are testing, especially if you want to teach more than just one subject. I'll never forget, I made the terrible error of just thinking, because I'd come from a private school background for, you know, the previous kind of 5 years, where VR was very important, that the Sutton schools needed VR, and it didn't at all. So I was going around offering VR as well, and people are thinking, why are you offering that when, you know, why are you teaching that when the Sutton schools don't need it? So really be clear about what the schools want. Check the provider, meaning, so there are 2 main companies who do write the 11 plus exams for grammar schools, which are CEM and GL. But as I say, Sutton just do their own thing, so it doesn't even count, and some of the other counties do as well. But then a lot of the private schools are now switching to ISEB and or ATOM, and are using online papers. So it's a completely different way to kind of approach the test. Same skills, different format. So be really clear about the format of the exam and the provider and what it will look like. But make sure you get loads of free stuff. That's the very first thing I did. I went on every website, downloaded all the papers I could get for free, downloaded familiarization materials I could get. There is so much out there for free. There are free videos. You just have to look at TikTok and YouTube. There's a lot of groundwork you can do yourself. Even in some of the Facebook groups, like Ilana King, who you probably know, and some of you might have done her courses. She has guides. She has, free guides and things for you. And Layla, you're absolutely right, which is why I got myself in a pickle. Lots of the Surrey independents do VR, which is why I thought the grammars did as well until I did my research, but not until I'd started teaching. So, you know, we all make mistakes. Now, as I said, there are courses out there, not many. The main one I know of is Ilana King's, who has an 11 plus course that you can purchase. But there are other people that I think might be offering, again, some free videos. I don't know a lot of them, to be honest, because I've just kind of got myself going. And once I felt comfortable, it was a bit too late to start doing courses. But the social media groups are brilliant. Now, there are a lot, so be careful. I had a lot of overwhelm when I started looking at social media groups. And the worst thing you can do as well is compare yourself. So when COVID hit and I went online, and then I started joining a lot of groups, I just got overwhelmed with how many people were offering things. And of course, then I'm looking at all their free stuff and thinking, oh my God, they're so much better than me. They're so much more slick. You know, they're offering this and that. So just be careful. Comparison, you know, is the thief of joy. I can't remember who said that, but it is the thief of joy. So be careful, you know, and don't forget, think about what you're able to do. Think about what you know. But there's lots of stuff out there if you're stuck on something. Thanks for answering for me, Layla. And there's all sorts of other resources. So, you know, I won't lie, there are other 11 plus people offering freebies if you sign up to their, you know, their email list. You know, I'm one for being as transparent as I can be. So, you know, I will often say to people if I've joined their email list, look, I've joined it, I hope you don't mind. I'm not going to use it, but it's just good for, you know, personal development, helping me. But, you know, as tutors, we are here to support each other. I'm in a lot of other tutors groups, they're in mine. You can get a lot of resources out there. It's all online for you. It couldn't be a better time, if you like, to be in this world. Now, at this point, do we have any questions? You can either write them online on the chat, or you can just put your yellow hand up, or whatever color your hand is, and if you want to ask any questions at this stage. If not, we will move on, but I'll just check, see if anyone has a question. Mock exams. Oh, that is a good one. I will come to that in a minute if you don't mind. I do have my opinions on mock exams. The answer is yes, but I will talk a little bit more about those in a little while. And if I don't, remind me to come back. Do you make your own result? Okay, well, I'll answer it now. Mock exams. Do you mean, Sarah, providing your own or advising children to do them?
I've had a few parents that have started asking for mock exams, and I don't offer them at the moment. To be honest, I've been doing sort of the skills work and that side. It's just considering how to start, where I'd get them from, making sure that I'm not, you know.
Which areas are you looking to work with? What type of exam?
They're largely, most of mine are GL, to be honest.
Okay.
So I think there's 2 different examples online, aren't there, of different papers, but there's not loads. I've got one locally that's it's a CEM style exam that they write themselves. So obviously that would be trickier. So different things I do is once a term I do an in-house assessment anyway. So I kind of call that my mock. So I do that anyway, because I say to the parents, it's all very well if they do homework for me, but what's the point if it's not under timed or pressure conditions? So I do offer kind of an assessment at the end of each term. I offer something in my area. I don't know who first coined the phrase, but there's something called a paper class, which is basically a kind of a mock test. So people in my area offer paper classes and mocks. Paper classes are more like regular, just practice tests. So I mean, there are people who offer them every week in my area, and I know a load of people who go to them. But I have also had parents say, look, we want everything from you. Can you not offer some? So I now offer what's called a paper class, which is almost like a practice test. I offer that once every half term. And I actually write those myself. The trouble is, especially in my area, there are only a few providers who give paid papers, but the parents will buy them. So if I provide them with a paid paper or get a license for it, they've already done it anyway. So unfortunately, I have had to buy. Now, there is somebody I'm working with, a tutor in my local area. Thank God, she's written about 20 papers herself. I know none of her kids come to me, so I've asked to buy a license off of her. You might be able to find some white label providers who will write a test for you, and then, you know, you pay for a license and it will be branded in your name. I don't know any off the top of my head. I've just been trying to seek some out myself, but I finally found a local tutor just by connecting. But to be honest, it is a pain in the neck to write your own, but once you've done it a few times and tested it out, I would do a couple of beta tests
on, you know, a couple of kids for free, offer it as a free service, and please get a brief reader. I cannot tell you how many times a kid's gone, there's a mistake here, and I'm like, oh God, you know. But over time, but then once you've got a bank of them, you can just recycle them. But the difficulty is they'll often buy them themselves if you don't write them themselves. But I do recommend doing them every so often. Now, the difficulty is I can't offer them face to face. So I've had to make mine unique in a way to draw people in, because it's almost like, well, why would we do a mock exam if it's not like the real thing? So I've kind of done mine in a way that is teaching them about time management, and we go through the test as well. So to make it slightly unique and to make it sellable, if that makes sense, and to kind of give guidance. But I would say if you can't provide them, find other people who do in your area. But otherwise, it is quite a sensible idea, because then it's giving them proper exam and timing. And then it means you can see how a child is, you know, performing under time conditions.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I just want to make sure.
That's all right. I make my own resources out of past papers. I curate is what I say at the moment. So I have bought some licenses of very well-known providers, and I do a mixture of writing my own resources. If there are any good ones out there, I use theirs, like CGP Online, good old Twinkle, although obviously Twinkle is so well-known. I try and be really careful how I use Twinkle, or I try and adapt it. But I do write as well. But my long-term plan is to provide booklets that are completely my own work in the end, because that way no one can ever say, we've done this before. Which can get a bit of a pain. So it's hard work. I won't lie to you. In the early days, I was working very long hours to produce things. But now, of course, it gets easier, because now it's not like I'm literally doing the same thing every year. I constantly review what I'm doing and tweak it and change it if it needs to be. But I do have a really strong, you know, bank now of work that I can replicate, reproduce and use again, as long as I'm keeping up with what the you know, everyone's doing. But obviously, like, the independent schools changed and became online, so I've had to change certain things to kind of work with that. But I do a mixture. How can I effectively track and measure progress? What indicators should I look for to assess? So one of the ways in which I do track and measure progress is by using my own kind of assessments at the end of the term. The other thing, of course, you can do is if you go onto somewhere like Twinkle, they provide the ones for years 5 and 6, but they obviously have the big tick sheets of the different skills for reading, writing, blah, blah, blah. So you can look obviously at those and the, you know, like the, what do they call them? Indicators, performance indicators, and you can tick off, are they using semicolons, for instance, in their writing? Are they, you know, scanning and skimming for text effectively? Things like that. So you can use you can use a range of kind of qualitative and quantitative assessment to help you. But also, if you know, if you've been teaching a while, you know, it's instinctive as well. You know, if a child is, you know, are they inferring from the text? Are they able to pick up on those clues? But, you know, a simple kind of spreadsheet of key skills is a good way to go for, you know, regular kind of formative assessment. But I would say every now and again, definitely doing some timed assessments is good. Now, whether a student is ready for the exam. Well, in my case, I deliberately produce a program of work that I would say only makes them ready right at the last minute. I'll be really honest with you. I personally believe in kind of like marathon training. You know, you don't have somebody ready for a marathon 6 months before the marathon, and then they just run marathons until the marathon. And I make this really clear to my parents, and this actually goes against a lot of people in my area because they have a different approach, and they will cover everything by April and then just practice. And then the kids, in my opinion, are burnt out and bored. So I say I get them exam ready, like by a week before. You know, we are constantly building up slowly. One of the ways you can check if a student is ready is obviously checking their kind of scores if you're doing regular tests. I mean, you don't have to do tests in the class either. You can obviously set them a test for homework and give key kind of advice on how long it should take, and get the parent to make sure it's done under test conditions and then submit a score. But, you know, if you're I would say you're looking at, for grammar schools, around about the 80% mark by the time they get to the end of the summer of year 5. Obviously, for independent schools, it differs massively. When I was working towards independent school exams, we were looking more at 70%, but the test was in certain senses was a lot harder. So it depends on the test. But yeah, I would say a balance of obviously doing the key skills, but also testing under time conditions without help from parents. However you try and put that in place is really important. A license cost is normally about £150 a year, depending on how many students you've got. Now for Twinkle, that's a lot lower, but for some of the papers I bought and some of the other materials, I'm looking at about 150 per license. It's not cheap, but that might be something you look for in the future if you're not quite at that point in terms of your income. Okay, we'll keep going, but keep the questions coming. I just want to check where we are. Oh, that's good. We're halfway, and I'm not very good with timing. So the last couple of times I presented for the TTA, I've gone over massively. So I'm really trying to keep to time today. So how do you want to do it? That's also really important. So when I started, you know, tutoring, I was one-to-one and I was face-to-face. Didn't even have a plan. To be honest, I'm one of those teachers. If you're in Sharon Corley's group, I am that typical teacher who, so I don't know how I did 20 years in the classroom. I absolutely don't know how I did it. And then I came out exhausted, burnt out, literally just grappled together to get some one-to-ones. Didn't know what I was, well, I knew I wanted to teach English, but I was driving to Chelsea on a Sunday morning at 9 o'clock. And then I was driving all around Croydon and, you know, doing 7 hours on a Saturday and a Sunday and then all through the week. You know, I had no actual plan. But once things started to come together, I knew eventually I wanted groups and I wanted them face to face. So that's what I started aiming for. Now, slight plug here. If you want to know more about groups, you might be aware Samantha and I are doing a free webinar. It's not affiliated with the TTA, just for transparency. We're doing that on the 16th of August. That's free. And if you want to know about setting up groups, find out more from me on my Facebook or LinkedIn page about how to sign up for that. But even now, since COVID, that's changed again. So for instance, you know, I went from one-to-one, face-to-face, to then over a period of about 3 years, morphing into groups face-to-face. And now, and then obviously through COVID, I was completely online. And now I do a mixture. So I run 4 classes a week that are face-to-face, purely for the 11 plus. And then I do another 10 classes online, 1 for year 3, and the rest are for Key Stage 3 and 4. So don't be afraid that it can change over time. And that's why I want to be clear. Don't panic if you don't have this grand master plan. You might have, but it can change. And even now I'm looking at maybe changing again. So, you know, you don't have to stick to something, but it might just be your next step. So think about what suits you best. What are you going to do? I'm even looking now at some self-paced courses, meaning, you know, creating some video courses that children can complete on their own, because my waiting list is so long. I know I'm never going to be able to meet the demand. Now, in all fairness, I do try and recommend other people to these people, but sometimes they just want to wait. But it seems a shame to not provide something that they could be getting on with. So I'm looking at creating some self-paced courses as well. But, you know, it might change, but have a think. How are you going to do this? For many of you, you might just want to be doing it one-to-one, and that's perfectly fine. But I would say that out of all the different types of need out there for tuition, 11 plus is one of those that I think is really accessible by groups, because you're working towards a goal and you're working towards a standard that everyone understands. You know, again, I talk more about how to achieve this in the course, and also in, you know, we dip into it in the free webinar as well. So the free webinar is to give you, that I'm doing with Samantha, is to give you some ideas about what we do in our full-on course. So have a think about that though. That's really important to think about. Now, next thing you're going to want to do is tell people. And this is the most important thing. So when I started, it was very different. I literally signed up for a listings company called First Tutors. You may or may not have heard of that. Where what I like about First Tutors is they haven't become an agent. They haven't become an agency like Tutor Hunt. So in Tutor Hunt, now I think you have to pay them a commission and it works like an agency. When I first joined, it was like a listings organization and you could just list yourself. People paid to get your details and then boom, boom, Bob's your uncle. Now, First Tutors, as far as I'm aware, still operate like that. So the only time that anyone pays anything is to get your details if they're interested in working with you. But be careful, because I got into a bit of trouble when I started advertising groups, because they're not for groups. They are very much still just for one-to-one and often face-to-face. But there are many other ways you can get started. You can tell agencies and join agencies that you are offering the 11+. Listing websites, I said, social media groups. There are loads of groups, and particularly your local area, even if you're online, there are loads of agencies all wanting lots of details. Layla, can you expand on that? What do you mean by wanting lots of details? Maybe come back to me. I just want to know what you mean by that. But there are loads of social media groups. So there are tutor groups where you can advertise if people want, you know, other tutors can then recommend you. But there's lots of groups. So I still go onto my Wellington Facebook group. And obviously I have to be careful on what days I can, you know, advertise. But there are loads of ways in which you can advertise yourself on local social media groups. Thank you, Layla. That makes sense. Tutor support groups. The Teachers Learning Network, I can say, and also Twinkle have a tutor group, support group. Ilana King does a specific one for the 11+. I think it's 11+ and 7+. That's really good. So there's a couple you can join. Richard Cowell has a group called Thrive in Your Tutor Business. Can't remember what it's called. Something like that. But those are really good ones, where they are specifically to support tutors. Different people have different opinions about this. I do have a website. I didn't at first, though. It took about a year before I bothered, because I have so many inquiries. It's much easier just to get people to look at what I offer. Otherwise, I'm on all the time just repeating myself. So the first thing I make sure people do when they inquire is, please go to my website. Have you checked what's on there? Are you still interested? I don't actually have my own Facebook group. I only have a page. I have my own personal page and I have a Wonderlearn page. I'm toying with the idea of a group, but it takes a lot. It takes a heck of a lot of management, and it can get very challenging, if I'm honest with you. So that's not something I actually need right now. But I have a page, so I put a lot of stuff up there, again, about what Wonderlearn does and how amazing all the kids are and what we do and how much fun we have. And I do actually just repeat that on Instagram as well. And then I kind of tweak it a little bit for my LinkedIn page. I've also joined with local businesses. So I work with a local artist who comes and does my celebration party that I run at the end of the 11+, and we you know, put on a big celebration, and she does what's called an arty party, but then obviously it feeds into her feed so people can see how I link with local businesses. I used to do a pancake party with a local cafe who then used to kind of you know, advertise that. Another really good group, although it's more for parents, but it's the 11+ journey. And what I like about that is it's very much to support parents, but it's a great way of you giving back by, answering questions that, parents might have. But that in itself shows you are an expert and you are showcasing your knowledge. And then people often click through to you and think, oh, that was a really good answer. What did she say, he say? And then they look at you and often then will contact you from sharing your expertise in a group that's for parents. And they can also, a lot of these parent groups can often allow you to advertise on certain days as well. We're nearly at the end, so we will have time for a couple more questions. I'm determined not to go too far over. Now, that should say happens, and it did on one of my saved versions, but not on this one. What happens if now, look, you are going to have bad days. Nobody responds. I'm overwhelmed. I still feel like I don't know what. You are going to have days like that. I remember when I started a year 3 preparation group, this was before COVID, and it was in the church hall I was using. And the volunteer who kind of was, tidying up the church, I had one child in this group, and he said to me, well, that's not very good, isn't it? You haven't got very good numbers. And I said, they'll come. Sometimes you've just got to have faith and take a leap. Now, you know what? Sometimes things don't work out. I won't lie. I advertised for a fun reading club this summer, had 2 people interested, couldn't really run a club with just 2 for what I was trying to do. It wasn't the right time. I advertised too late. It didn't work. You are allowed to make mistakes. And I'm someone who's been doing this a long time. My reading club, I just left it too late, didn't advertise it as well as I wanted to, didn't get the word out there. As I said, I'd had loads of interest from my clients, a year ago, all saying they wanted to do it. I didn't manage it very well. I've learned from that. I'll try it again a different way. Don't ever feel anything is a waste. Even if you think something doesn't go well, you can learn from it. You can adapt it. Okay. But also, what happens if you love it? I didn't know 7 years ago I would be in this position now. I'm still having ups and downs. I'm still having good days, bad days. I still make mistakes. I've had a lot of challenges, but I love what I do because I believe in what I do. Okay. Now we've got a couple of more questions. I always record lessons. It's in my terms and conditions. So when I'm online, and the reason I record lessons is there's several reasons. One is, several are pedagogical. One is that it allows children to review if they've forgotten something, because we do get through quite a lot of material in the time. So it means they can review the lesson again. And if there's a bit they were stuck on or couldn't remember or forgot or needed more, reminding, they could go to that lesson and they could go to that section and go over it again. It's really helpful for parents to see how I teach, so they know, especially I would say for maths. If you're teaching maths, obviously a lot of the mathematical ways in which things are taught these days is completely different from the way the parents have been taught, and it can get really confusing for children if they're taught too many ways. So the way you're teaching it or suggesting, then the parent can see that as well and back that up at home. But I also have a policy that, you pay for a block of lessons, you are committing to that. If you can't make a lesson, no worries. There is a recording, and I do expect them to watch it, because the way my lessons work, they build from one to the next. So it's very difficult if you miss a lesson not to then, come to the next lesson without having watched the recording. But just remember that there's that great saying, isn't there? It's something like, oh, my dear, what if it doesn't work out, or something? What if I fail? And then he says, I think it's from Peter Pan, but what if you fly? Remember that. You will fly. Remember that. Okay. I am one of those people that plan for the worst, but hope for the best. So I constantly drive my husband mad with worst case scenarios, whatever it is in life. Our housing situation, our worst case scenario, we'll probably live on a houseboat. It does his head in. But know what your worst case scenario is. Your worst case scenario might be you carry on doing what you're already doing. Is that so bad? Obviously, you want to progress and move forward, but I'm sure you'll find a way round. Now, now I do record for safeguarding reasons as well. I think that's important. And when I have face-to-face students, I'm never on my own with them. How do you work around holiday periods? So well, what I did was, I think Sharon Corley talks about this. You've got your bottom line, what you need to earn per year. I break it down into, so I don't break it down into months, but I do 30 lessons a year in blocks of 5, 6 blocks of 5. I do summer courses as well and other bits and pieces. But I think about what my bottom line is. If I need to earn this much, okay, and I'm working 30, I've got 30 weeks a year, say that I'm working, and I do 14 lessons, you know, and I want to earn this much, and I want to charge roughly this, how many students do I need? Or you do it the other way around, I want to work with this many, how much do I have to charge? So I have made sure that what I earn covers me over any of those periods. But I do run extra things as well. So I do monthly workshops, I do a GCSE Easter course, I do summer courses, but I make sure that everything I'm bringing in, if I divide it over 12 months, gives me what I need. So I don't kind of just think, okay, £45 an hour for one-to-one times 10 per week times whatever, that's what I need a month. Even when I was doing one-to-one, I would think, what do I need to earn over 10 months to then carry me forward for 12 months, if that makes sense. Fair amount to charge is one of those that's as long as a piece of string. I know somebody who charges £250 an hour. They work with high net worth people. I charge 60. I know some people who charge 45. Now, I never actually offer one-to-one anymore, but if I have the odd one, that's what I charge. I live in London, you know, I have to pay the bills, but I also know what my worth is. I will not charge any less than that. But obviously for groups, I charge a lot less, but then I also have quite big groups. So some of my groups are going to be up to 20 this year. So, you know, you've got to think, well, what do you think is fair? I did a lot of research of what other people were charging as well, though, because of course, at the time I was face to face. So it made sense to look at my competitors. And for me, there was no point charging £100 an hour for a group session. Do you see what I mean? But I will not undervalue myself either. And I had somebody say to me, you know, so-and-so charges 45, why are you charging 60? And I said, well, they're undervaluing themselves. And I left it at that. You know, I'm not going to get into that comparison game. I charge what I charge because I believe in my worth and my experience. I do have a policy, though, that I will never turn somebody down because of money. So then we work out a plan. I don't make that widely known, but I do tell parents, it's not a case of what you think is expensive, but if somebody really wants to work with me and there's an issue with fees, we will discuss it. I do put my fees on my website. I want to be as transparent as possible. And then that way people can already see whether they think they want to choose to pay that or not. And then it stops a lot of people wasting basically their time, you know, trying to do. I don't negotiate fees. No, I don't need to. But even when I was starting out, I didn't. Okay. But that's something, you know, we can discuss separately if you have, you know, it's different situations. It is different situations. I think we are coming to the end. We have 2 more slides and then I'll be able to stop. So I'm not going over by too much. So this is just a little share. It's nothing. I don't want to be kind of sycophantic about this, but that was me in 2016. No way did I think this is where I would be. Now, I'm not saying this is success. This is success for me. This is what I love doing. This is what I do now. And I love it. And I enjoy one-to-one, but only occasionally. And I decided very early on, one-to-one just wasn't for me. Probably because, you know, I am an ex-teacher. But for some people, they absolutely have. They've gone from teaching and absolutely love one-to-one, and for all the many pedagogical and ideological reasons, you know, that is what tutoring at its essence is about. We could argue around the houses as to whether this is actually tutoring. That's for another day. But this is what I love doing. But I think what's really helpful is to visualize in small steps or large steps, however it's going to work for you, where you want to be. I took small steps. I didn't go from this to this overnight. This took me 7 years. And I had to do things like, you know, manage my timetable with a few one-to-one still and a few groups and mixed stages. And then I was able to do this, that, and the other. So, you know, it didn't go from this to this overnight. It came in manageable steps that I had to work out. Okay, so you might have to think, okay, what's your end goal? But how can you break it down into smaller steps? And it might be that you can't do it overnight, but you might have to do a bit like I did, which was a bit of a mixed timetable. Okay, and so when somebody left after having finished with me, I then put a group in that place. And it wasn't till about 2018, 2019 that I could literally say, that's it. I'm now putting a line through one-to-one. This is the way forward. Come with me, or I will help you go to someone who does offer one-to-one. Okay, now I just want to see if there's anything else. So when I'm teaching creative writing online, I actually get them to submit homework afterwards. So I then mark it on a tablet and send it back. Some people I know use Google Docs. Mine literally handwrite. And I tell you why I get them to do it is because that's what they have to do in the exam. It's a stupid dissonance at the moment between how we're moving on with EdTech in lessons and yet how archaic exams are. But I say, until exams are typed, what is the point of them typing everything for me? So sometimes they will type, but at the moment they do handwrite because that's how they're being tested. Yeah, Layla, I agree with you. I presume some of you are just having a little discussion with each other. So, right, some action today. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. Julius, are you still there? Have we got a couple more minutes?
I am, Charlotte. Yeah, of course.
And that's okay?
Yeah, go for it.
I still haven't managed my target of finishing under an hour.
Oh, you're not too far off.
No, I'm doing better than I did. So look at the action for today. Identify the impossible. What seems impossible for you today? I didn't even know what I could achieve. I'll be really honest with you. All I literally wanted was to make enough money to survive when I first started tutoring. And then I built things up over time. And even now I'm thinking about the impossible. I have some impossible dreams about where I want to go next. I look at someone like Robert Lomax. If you don't know who he is, look him up online and on YouTube. He is in many ways where I want to be. He's doing incredible stuff. And Mr. Bruff is doing incredible stuff with secondary age students. Now, they're already doing what I would have liked to do. So it's almost like, well, I'm not necessarily going to replicate them. But they, as sole traders who have not become agencies or business, are doing amazing things in the teaching world where I would like to be. So that's my impossible. What's yours right now? And then think to yourself, let's break it down to just one thing you're going to commit to today. What are you going to commit to today? Are you going to join a Facebook group and just say, hi, I'm here? Are you going to look up some more freebie stuff that maybe could get you going? What are you going to do? Write it down now. And then something that's really difficult, I know, because we could argue nothing's new, you know, there's no new idea out there. How are you going to communicate what your unique selling point is? We're all offering the same thing, let's face it. But for me, you know, what has become evident, it's my passion, the way I deliver my lessons and how I get to know my students. And for many of you, it'll be the same, although then that's not a USP, but you'll find your own way of doing it. Is it the way you relate to students? Is it the way you guide them? Is it the way you help parents? Is it the mindfulness and the well-being and all of that? Is it that you're really clear about the structure and you'll give them something that's really structured and clear? You know, I'm sure there are plenty of other passionate people out there. My USP, in actual fact, is not completely unique, but it's as unique as I can make it. I hope it's okay to ask these questions. Have you asked any extra questions? Here we go. Shoot, they've come. So I'll ask them really quick. Well, while people are writing those down, I'll continue asking the questions, but please do write them down. And what I would love to hear in a minute is if there aren't any more questions, tell me what that one thing is you're going to do today. And well, share any of those or all of them. What's the impossible dream that you want? What one thing are you going to do today? What is your USP? And you can share all or none of those. Okay, so what is your cutoff? So I start at year 3, but the majority start at year 4. And more, I just don't have room to take anyone in year 5. So I don't really take anyone in year 5 because my year 4s follow through. So, you know, I communicate that quite clearly. The optimum time is to start in year 4. You know, I'll take on a couple if I have space in year 5, but I don't tend to. What advice should I give to parents? Oh my gosh, do you know, that could be a whole new, we could do a whole webinar on that, couldn't we, Julius? Advice involvement is constructive. Where do I start? Let me think about that one for a second because we haven't got a lot of time. Pitfalls, my goodness. Should tutors be aware? Well, it is parents' expectation, biggest one. Now, I am actually, well, I'll tell you 2 things. I've done a website. In fact, I think it's best if I direct you rather than give you loads now because we haven't got time. I actually did, at the last TTA conference, I did a webinar, a live webinar on managing parents' expectations, which is for me one of the biggest things, and not, you know, not giving your students too much stress. I suggest I'll direct you to that. Pencil Spaces did a recording of it. It is, if you type in Charlotte Watson Tutor, you'll find it. And I'm in the dress and I'm there live. And I suggest you look at that in terms of parents ensuring their involvement is constructive and some of the things in terms of the pitfalls. Look at that video because I would say a lot of your answers will come from there. Recommend teaching for tutoring. I tell you what, I think the best thing for you to do is maybe are we allowed to email separately, Julius? Is that okay? Because I think there's too much to answer in this one.
Yeah, of course. If you wanted to pop your email in the chat, Charlotte, then anyone who has any questions for you can fire them over to you.
I think that's going to be social media. I'm going, oh, brilliant. So we've got some actions. Social media posts from other tutors. Yay. Clear plan for my offering and actually identify a USP. Going to join a Facebook group. Yay. Look for freebies. Excellent. So let me just, Mrs. Watson at wonderland.co.uk. But also what I do suggest you do is if you're not a member of Ilana King's group, that will have lots of information in there. I think it's called 7+ and 11+ something, but you'll see her face. Ilana, let me write it down for you. Ilana King. Sorry, there's no capital, being an English teacher. I have no commission from anyone. I just want you to know every advice I give is, or people I link you to, I have no commission, as I say, or affiliation costs pending my way. Good, Sarah. So we can catch up then because I'm doing a talk on parents and well-being and stuff like that at her symposium.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Charlotte.
Excellent. I think it's best if we stop. I feel like we could go on a long time, but as usual, I'm one of those teachers who always used to over-prepare. But there we go. I'm just trying to look at how to stop presenting. And it's been fabulous to see some friendly faces again and to meet some new people. But I would suggest that we come to an end now, come to a close. And I thank you all for joining me. I am doing, by the way, groups. I am doing another spotlight, particularly on groups, as well as the free webinar I'm also giving with Samantha, and the course we're also offering that you can purchase. So there's lots more opportunities to get involved if you're specifically wanting to ask questions about groups. But thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Charlotte. That was brilliant. And yeah, it's a shame we didn't have longer, really, because I know we could have kept going for probably another hour or so.
I know, that's my problem.
Well, I think, as you mentioned, there are other summer sessions coming up, and are you doing another summer session as well for TTA?
Yeah, I'm doing a summer session on kind of pedagogical things to do with group tuition. So, you know, not so much about, so the one I'm doing with Sam is about setting them up and how to attract students to them. And then the one I'm doing free for the TTA is more about the pedagogy of group tuition, you know, online, face-to-face, how to manage group tuition.
Great. Well, for those of you who want to join that, you can go to the TTA website and go to the summer sessions page, and then you can sign up to Charlotte's next summer session. And there's also...
yeah, also in the October TTA conference, Sam and I are also doing a group tuition thing, which obviously links in really well to 11+, because it's a really open market and really positive market for doing group tuition. So kind of links nicely.
Yeah, and there's tickets available on the TTA website for the conference in October. So if you're interested in that, there's plenty going on, including Charlotte's keynote speech. So thanks for joining everyone today. I'll leave it at that. Thanks so much, Charlotte. That was really good, very interesting, and I think I can tell from all the messages that are going into the chat that everyone found it really useful.
Thank you, and thanks for your participation, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, and take care for the rest of the day.
Bye-bye.